Oops. Okay, so we got up to yesterday. The last thing that we did was we said that the mitzvah of telling the story of Super Yitzias Mitzrayim, the story of the Exodus, only applies Pesach night, and it's during the time when we have the matzah and the maror in front of us. In other words, the mitzvah does not start earlier in the day, and if you hold that the afikomen has to be eaten before midnight or halachic midnight, so then the mitzvah of Super Yitzias Mitzrayim would also stop at that point, because the mitzvah of telling the story goes together with the mitzvah of eating matzah and eating maror. So we're now up to the next part. The next part tells us that in the beginning we come from idol worshippers. Now, saying that we come from idol worshippers is significant because we mentioned a few times ago that there's a disagreement in the Talmud. What is that we have to start with the negative and we have to work our way towards the positive. In other words, we can only appreciate the positive if we discuss what the negative was. So says the Talmud that there's a disagreement. What is the negative? So according to one opinion, the negative was we have to talk about the fact that that we were once upon a time slaves. Excuse me. According to the other opinion, though, the negative is the spiritual negative. The fact that we don't have a very distinguished lineage. So says the Haggadah, our forefathers came from idol worshippers. Hashem says, I know that once upon a time you rejected me. I know that once upon a time you worshipped idols. But nevertheless, I still want to be close with you. Even though you rejected me, I'm willing to bring you close. So therefore, Hashem has brought us close to him. Even though in the past we weren't so great. Now, who these idol worshippers are? The simplest one would just be to say there's talking about Terach. Terach is the father of Abraham, and he had an idol shop where he himself sold idols and he encouraged others to sell idols. So that would be the easiest one to say. Usually we say the Jewish lineage begins from the times of Abraham. So it would be rough to say that when we talk about Avos Seinu, when we talk about our fathers, that we're talking about who Avram's father was, Terach. But we don't really get held accountable for the fact of what Terach did. Avram on his own recognized that there's a God in the world, and he gets all the credit for that. And therefore, to say, well, here's who his father was. So, so some people say, in fact, the Rambam himself writes that not only did Terach worship idols, but he taught Avram to worship idols. He educated his son in what he thought was a good thing. So he took Avram, he taught Avram to worship idols, and Avram believed that that was the right thing. So there's a disagreement whether Avram recognized Hashem when he was 3 or Avram recognized Hashem when he was 48. So let's go with the opinion that he was 48. But if he only recognized Hashem when he was 48, so what was he doing until then? So it could be that at some point he was an agnostic and he didn't believe in idols and he didn't know what to believe in. But definitely for a long time he believed in idols just like pretty much everyone in his generation. Shem, the son of Noach, was around back then. He had a yeshiva, but it seems like he didn't really do outreach. Shem's great grandson, also part of the yeshiva, also doesn't seem like they did any outreach. So there were people that were around, people that taught about Hashem if you were looking, but nobody there to actively teach Avram anything until Avram went searching for it. So Avram himself was worshiping idols. So even though the fact that Avram once upon a time was an idol worshiper, still Hashem brought us close. Then tonight I saw another explanation, which I imagine I saw in the past, but I didn't remember, and that is that it's referring to us in Egypt. Last night I mentioned that when we were sitting there at the Red Sea, and Hashem told the Red Sea to split, so the Red Sea said, why did the Jews deserve to split? The Egyptians worship idols, the Jews worship idols. What in the world makes the Egyptians any worse than the Jews? They're all a bunch of idol worshippers. And Hashem answered to the Red Sea, you just do what I say, and you split because the Jews, they're on their way to receive the Torah, and that's what makes them special, even though right now, you're right, even though right now they're on a very low level. So the Jews themselves, even though we had a nice tradition, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the 12 tribes, and further generations, but eventually they did get influenced by the Mitzrayim and the Egyptian culture, and therefore the Haggadah is telling us that even the Jews themselves that were in Mitzrayim, they went and they worshipped idols, but Hashem never forgot about us, and therefore Hashem always went and Hashem always redeemed us. Shenamar, the pasuk says. So now we have here a pasuk from Sefer Yoshua. Now this is right after the Jews have entered into the land of Israel. The Jews have entered into Israel and they're standing there, and Yoshua is giving them a speech, telling them, telling them a short synopsis of their history. So here is what Yoshua says to them. Yoshua says to them, now this pasuk, let me see if I can remember where it's from. Here it is. So it's not right after they came to Israel, but sometime after they're there in Israel, and Yoshua is speaking to the people. This is what he says to the Jewish people. Vayomer, it's actually the last chapter of the book of Joshua, Sefer Yoshua. Vayomer Yoshua al Kolam. Yoshua says to all the nation, Ko amar Hashem Elokei Yisrael. So says the Lord. Be'ever hanahar Yashva v'seichem yalam. On the other side of the river, your forefathers sat. Terach Avi Avraham v'Avi Nachar. Terach, who's the father of Avram, and also Avram's brother Nachar. For some reason, Avram has another brother Haran, who's the father of Lot and father of Sarai, and he's not mentioned. Vayavdu Elohim Acherim. They worshipped other gods. I took your father Avram from the other side of the river. I brought him into Israel, into the land of Canaan. And I had him walk everywhere. The reason why Hashem had him walk there is because for halachic purposes, so there's different ways that you acquire something. If you want to buy an object, so of course you give money, but the way that actually halachically becomes yours is by taking it and picking it up. By taking an object and picking it up, that's how you make an acquisition. Now, of course, it has to be that the person wants you to acquire it. If I walk over to your item and I pick it up, it doesn't become mine. But if the person says, here, I'm giving this to you as a gift, then it only becomes mine when I go and I acquire it. Without being too difficult, there's a whole debate what to do now. I believe in Jacksonville it wouldn't be a problem, but in many cities they have drained the mikvah and not allow people that buy new utensils to go to the mikvah. Why? Because they're concerned of the spreading of COVID-19. So I know that in many cities they have kept it open and they have gloves there and they have a rule, one person at a time, and wear gloves, and when you finish, wash your hands. And they say there's not a problem. But other places it has. Other places they've closed it. So the question is, okay, fine, but a lot of people, they've never made Pesach before. Now they're stuck home for the first time, so they have to buy all these new dishes. So they have all these new dishes. What in the world are they supposed to do to table their new dishes? So the beaches, let's say, are closed. The mikveh is drained. So what are you supposed to do? So there's different advice that people are giving. So one of the pieces of advice, which some people like, some people don't like any good halach discussion. But one of the pieces of advice is when you go to the store and you buy it and you pay for it. So let's say you go to Walmart. So it belongs to Walmart. You give Walmart the money. Now it's yours to acquire. Walmart has now relinquished their ownership, but it doesn't become yours until you go and you make a kinyan, you make a halachic acquisition. How would one do that? By taking it and picking it up. When you pick it up, it becomes yours. If it's a refrigerator, then obviously you can't pick it up. So then you would push it a little bit. And when you push it a little bit, then it becomes yours. And an animal, it depends. If it's a small animal, you pick it up. If it's a large animal, so you push it a little bit, you call it, you tell it to come to you. These are halachas about how one acquires something. So getting back to the new utensils, so some rabbis have suggested that you got to remember to do this. But if you go to Walmart and you give them the money, and then you have in mind, I don't want to acquire it. I want Walmart to remain the owner of it for now. So then you take it, you bring it to your house, but the entire time that this item is in your house, you absolutely do not have in mind to acquire the item. So if you don't have in mind to acquire it, then it doesn't become yours. Now, halacha is that you only have to tovel in the mikveh something that belongs to a Jew. If it doesn't belong to a Jew, it doesn't require immersion in the mikveh. So therefore they say, even when you pick it up, have in mind, I don't want to make an acquisition.
So this is an interesting debate, not really relevant to the Haggadah, just for the fact that what happens if you buy a piece of land? So if you buy a piece of land, you can't drag the land to acquire it. You can't pick up the land, obviously, to acquire it. So what do you do? So the whole point is you have to show ownership. So one of the ways you show ownership is when you take something, you pick it up. How do you show ownership with a piece of land? So one of the ways that you show ownership with a piece of land is if there's a fence, you close the fence. By taking the fence and closing the fence, it's a symbolic act that shows ownership. So another thing is you could walk the property. So when Hashem says, I took Abraham and I had him walk the property, he walked across the entire land of Canaan. So it's Hashem's way of saying, and I wanted Avram to become the owner of Canaan. So I gave him the land. I had Avram walk through the land. So that's why he says, and I had him walk throughout the entire land of Canaan. I gave him a lot of children. Now, I only gave him Yitzchak, but probably a promise that he'll end up having many children. Yitzchak as Yaakov as Esav, and I gave Yitzchak Yaakov and Esav. Esav as Har Seir. So I gave Esav the mountain of Seir. I said, okay, fine, you go over there, you stay away from the rest of the Jewish people. The Yaakov Uvanav Yard Mitzrayim. Yaakov and the rest of his children ended up going down to Mitzrayim. Now, interestingly enough, this is a great synopsis of Jewish history. If it was up to me and I was the author of the Haggadah, I would probably continue with the next pasuk or two, because it continues, and it says, this is chapter 24 in Yeshua, pasuk Beis, Gimel, and Dal, 2, 3, and 4. But then it continues, and it says that Hashem says, and I sent Moshe and Aaron, and they brought plagues onto Mitzrayim, and afterwards I took the Jews out of Mitzrayim, and I took your fathers out of Mitzrayim, and Mitzrayim chased after them, and they ended up at the Red Sea, and they cried out to Hashem, and it has a nice summary. So you think it would be perfect. So why is it not here? So I don't know, but I did want to make one suggestion that says like this, that we have this idea that Moshe Rabbeinu's name doesn't appear in the Haggadah. Now, why doesn't Moshe Rabbeinu's name appear in the Haggadah? So I only know one explanation. I'm not the biggest fan of it. For whatever reason, it doesn't really resonate with me. But I guess it's probably true. It's the only answer that everyone says. Except for the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu's name does appear in the Haggadah, but only comes one time, and that one time is almost like an afterthought. It mentions it's talking about the plagues, and then it mentions that it mentions something about the splitting of the Red Sea, and it says that the splitting of the Red Sea, that the Jewish people, they believed in Hashem and in Moshe, his servant. So it's almost like an afterthought, but the whole time Moshe Rabbeinu's name doesn't make it in Haggadah. So it would seem that you have to, if you're talking about the story of the Exodus, and you're not mentioning Moshe, it seems like you would have to bend over backwards to not mention Moshe. So why is Moshe's name not mentioned? So the answer that everyone says is that it's true that Moshe Rabbeinu was the most loyal servant to Hashem. But after everything he said and done, he was just the agent. He was just a servant to Hashem. And Pesach night, we don't want to recognize the agent. Pesach night, we want to recognize Hashem himself. So, for example, like I tell my students, if the mailman comes and he brings you the birthday card from grandma, and you go over and you hug the man, and you say to the mailman, oh, thank you so much for bringing the present. I so appreciate that you brought me the present. And the mailman says, what are you hugging me for? He said, what do you mean, what am I hugging you for? You brought me the present. So the mailman's like, hug your grandmother, kid. I had nothing to do with this. Right? I'm just a delivery man. Don't hug the delivery man. Right? Somebody don't shoot the messenger. You hug the messenger. Right? So hug your grandmother. Don't hug me. I'm just a delivery man. So Moshe Rabbeinu, after everything is said and done, has no power to himself. Everything that he does, he's only able to do because Hashem wills it. So therefore, on Pesach night, we don't want to get caught up with thinking that everything comes from Moshe. If that happens, then you could end up with a danger, like what happens in the parsha a few weeks ago with the golden calf. Moshe Rabbeinu disappears, and the Jews say, we can't continue. The Jews say we can't continue. And think about it from a psychological point of view, it's very hard to blame the Jews for what they did with the sin of the golden calf. The Jews are sitting there in Egypt. They've been living there for 210 years. They've been slaves for 116 years. So they've been slaves for 116 years. Maybe it was 115 years at this point. And all of a sudden, Moshe Rabbeinu shows up. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu left Mitzrayim when he was a lad. How old was he? I don't know. Torah says he was a lad. So let's assume he wasn't too old. Let's make him 20. He shows up back to Mitzrayim. He's 80 years old. So he's been gone for 60 years. All of a sudden, he shows up. And, of course, originally things go very bad. He tells Pharaoh to let the Jews go, and Pharaoh says, what? And he goes and he says, that's it. I'm not giving you any more straw. And then the Jews get very angry with Moshe. They say, listen, Moshe, if you can't make it better, don't make it better. But at least don't make it worse. But, of course, in the end, The Jews are very appreciative of Moshe. So Moshe Rabbeinu was the one that saved them. So here they know, many of them that are alive, they were born into slavery. It's the only thing that they ever know. And the one that took them out of all this is Moshe Rabbeinu. So their total trust, their total belief is in Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moshe Rabbeinu disappears. As much as they were wrong to create the golden calf, and they were very wrong to do that, but nevertheless, a little bit, we can understand where they're coming from. We can understand where they're coming from, why they think that they can't manage without him. So therefore, Pesach night, we only want to talk about Hashem. Like later on in the Haggadah, it's going to say a drash from a pasuk that it says that Hashem says, "Ve'avarti be'eretz Mitzrayim," and the Haggadah says, and it was I, Hashem himself. It was not a malach, and it was not some type of seraph angel, and it was not an agent, and it was not any other power, but rather it was Hashem himself that went through the entire land of Mitzrayim and hit all the firstborn. So the whole message, the whole feeling that we're supposed to feel Pesach night is that it was all Hashem himself. So if it was all Hashem himself, so then we don't want to be concentrating on Moshe. I guess it's not such a bad answer. The more I'm saying it, the more I like it, but I don't know. I don't like it that much, but it's nice. It's a nice answer. So if we accept that, then perhaps that's the reason why we don't have the next pasuk over here in Yoshua. In other words, how did I start this all up by saying? I said we've been quoting here a few psukim from Sefer Yoshua. Yoshua's going to speak to the people, and he's reminding them of their history, and he's telling them that Hashem came and he took us out of the land. And it starts up by saying that Hashem says, "I chose Terach." I chose Avram, and I brought him into the land of Israel, and I gave him Yitzchak, and Yaakov and his children go to Mitzrayim. So you would think that the natural progression would be to continue with the next pasuk that talks about the time in Mitzrayim. So why doesn't it? So perhaps a simple answer would be because over there the very next pasuk mentions Moshe and Aaron. So if the next pasuk mentions Moshe and Aaron, so we have this policy for that reason that we're not mentioning Moshe tonight. So therefore, we have to cut it over there. We can mention the next pasuk. I don't know. Could be. Or just for whatever reason, that's why the Haggadah wanted to stop. Now, the Haggadah continues, and it says, Baruch Shomer Havtachaso Yisrael Baruch Hu. Blessed are you, Hashem, that you kept your word to the Jewish people. Now, there's two obvious questions over here. Which is this promise that Hashem kept. What is the promise that he kept? So there's two ways you can look at it. One way you can look at it is the promise that he's going to take us out of Mitzrayim, and the other way is to look at it, the promise that he's going to bring us to slavery. Now, if it's that he's going to bring us to slavery, why are we saying, blessed are you, Hashem, for doing that? That would seem strange. So some people say, well, there's a rule. You're supposed to bless Hashem for the good. You're supposed to bless Hashem for the bad. So therefore, even though this is not great, even though we're not happy to be slaves, you always have to bless Hashem. Why do we bless Hashem for keeping his word? Like, what would we expect? Would we expect otherwise? So this is different answers too. Probably the simplest answer is that we were a lot worse than we were supposed to be. We became influenced in a way that was not expected from us, and therefore we weren't necessarily deserving anymore. But Hashem said, even though you're not deserving anymore, I'm still going to take care of you. I'm still going to take care of you. So what is going on here? So there was a promise that Hashem made to Avram called the Bris Ben Amsar. In English, the covenant between the parts. Now, this takes place in Parshas Lech Lecha. Now, the very beginning of Parshas Lech Lecha, Avram is 75 years old. The assumption by almost everyone is that this story of the covenant between the parts takes place when Avram is 70 years old, which means that it's out of order. So you say, how could it be out of order? The answer is sometimes the Torah is written out of order. So this would be an example of a case where the Torah is written out of order, even though it doesn't sound that way. But that means that before Hashem ever came to Avram and said to him, go for your own sake, from your house, from your father's house, from your birthplace, go to some land that I will show you that you don't know where you're going, and he promises he's going to make him into a great nation. Before any of that took place, there's already a separate, different covenant between Hashem and Avram. They made this covenant between the parts. Now, what in the world is going on? So basically, Hashem told Avram to go take a bunch of animals and to cut them up into pieces. And then Avram is going to walk through the pieces, and then the Shekhinah, as if, is going to pass through the pieces. It seems that once upon a time, this was the way that they would make a covenant. Today, we would shake hands. Back then, it was a more dramatic. They would take these pieces of animals and they would cut them up and they make a path, and you would walk through the path. And that was a way of creating some type of agreement. So Avram goes and he creates this path of the animals. He walks through, and this is what Hashem says to him. Hashem says to him, "You're going to be my special mission." And I'll tell you what else is going to happen. He says, "Yadoa Teda Ki Ger Yezarach Be'eretz Cholam." I want you to know that your children are going to be strangers in a land that's not theirs. Va'avodum, and they're going to be worked as slaves. Ve'inu osam, they're going to make them suffer terribly. Arba me'os shana, for 400 years. But you should know that that nation that's being mean to you, that's being evil to you, that's oppressing you, I'm going to judge them for what they did. And then you will leave with a lot of riches. So what does all of this mean? So number one is that Hashem promises that we're going to be slaves for 400 years. In actuality, we weren't slaves for 400 years. We were actually slaves in Mitzrayim for 200. Well, we were in Egypt for 210 years. We were in Egypt for 210 years. The actual slavery was only for 116 years because the slavery only started after the last of the tribes died. The last one to die was actually Levi, even though he was from the oldest ones, third from oldest. But nevertheless, he was the last one to die. Until Levi died, the slavery did not begin. So it's true we were in Egypt for 210 years, but we actually were only slaves for 116 years. Hashem promises over here that we're going to be slaves for 400 years. So how do we make that all work? So there's a few answers that are given. One answer that's given is that you're right. You're right. The slavery was really too short. It was really too short, but Hashem had as if no choice. So therefore, he took us out early. He took us out early. And one of the reasons why we're suffering until today is because we're paying back. That, in other words, what should have happened is we should have stayed there. Like we mentioned yesterday that it says in the Zohar HaKadosh that we were on the 49th level of Tumah. We were all the way there on the bottom. And if we wouldn't have done something, we would have descended to the 50th level. So we had to do something. But unfortunately, we were so down on the bottom. So Hashem says, you're supposed to stay for 400 years. I can't let you stay for 400 years. I'm going to have to take you out early, but you guys are going to owe me. You're going to have to pay me. So one of the reasons why we're suffering now is still a payment for those 400 years. Another explanation says that it's true that in quantity, we weren't there for 400 years, but nevertheless, the Egyptians, they overworked us. They worked us so hard, they never gave us any rest, and they totally mistreated us, and they killed our babies, etc., that it's quality of 400 years. So while it's true that in quantity, it's not 400 years, but in quality, it's 400 years. Some people say that we're only supposed to work by day. They made us work by night also, so therefore it counts double. That's a little bit difficult because, like I said, they're only slaves for 116 years, but just being there in a foreign land, that was the promise, and that promise did come true. Now, Hashem says, I'm going to punish the people that did this to you. Now, why are they going to be punished? If Hashem said that this is going to happen to us for what that he told Aaron that we're going to be slaves, so then Paro should be able to come to Hashem and say, why are you going to bring 10 plagues on me? What did I do wrong? You wrote in the Torah, you promised Abram that there's going to be this foreign nation that's going to go and is going to attack. So what do you want from me? So the answer to that is that it's true that Hashem said that we're going to be oppressed by some foreign nation. But he never said who's going to do it. If he would have said Paro is going to be the one to oppress you, then of course Paro is not to blame for oppressing us. But he never said who it's going to be. So being that Hashem never said who it's going to be, Paro volunteered for the job. So Paro, you want to volunteer for the job, that's fine, but then you got to deal with the consequences. If you wouldn't have volunteered for the job, so then somebody else would have done it. All right? Hashem has no shortage of people that he could choose on to go and oppress the Jews. So you volunteer for the job, Paro says fine, but now you have to go and you have to suffer the consequences. That would be that would explain why Paro suffered. And then lastly, Hashem promises, but I want you to know when you leave, you're going to leave with great riches. So there's this famous Gemara. The Talmud tells us that when it was time to leave Egypt, so the Jews went around to the homes of all the Egyptians and they said, can I please borrow something from you? Some of your beautiful jewelry. So the Egyptians said to them, I would be happy to lend it to you, except that I don't have anything. And the Jews knew where it was, because after they finished burying all the dead during the plague of darkness, they then went and they snooped around the Egyptians' homes, and they noticed where the Egyptians hid everything, and they just like took note. Oh, she's got a gold necklace over here, he's got a diamond over here, he's got a... They do it. So then when they came to the Egyptians' home, and they said, can I please borrow that? And the Egyptian said, I would love to lend you if I had it, but I happen not to have it. So then they said back to the Egyptians, really, well, what about the one that's in your left cabinet? What about the one that's under your mattress? And they said, how does he know about that? But then they went to us, and we left it there. So the Medrash says that if you look at the text, so Hashem says to Moshe, please tell the Jews to go borrow stuff from the Egyptians. So why does he say please? What's with that, please? So it says the Talmud like this. That Hashem says, Avram Avinu was out there in Shemayim, and I'm afraid that he's going to come to me and he's going to complain. What's he going to say to me? He's going to say, let's look at this covenant that we made. You said that they're going to be in a strange land. Check. That happened. You said that they're going to be oppressed. Yep, that happened. They're going to suffer. That happened. They're going to be slaves. That happened. 400 years. Okay, we said that one's debatable. Right? But then you said they're going to leave with great riches. Right? So Hashem, everything you kept to the best. The slavery, unbelievable. But what happened to the riches? What happened to that? So therefore said Hashem, make sure that they go and they get all these riches. So Avram doesn't come to me with complaints. Now, everyone asks on the Gemara. They say, I don't understand. What's going on? Hashem is afraid that Avraham is going to come complain to him for not keeping his word, and that's why he has to keep his word. Hashem has to keep his word because Hashem has to keep his word. Well, why does he have to keep his word? Only because Avram is going to come complain. So they say like this. No, what it means to say is that, I'm trying to remember if it's the commentaries on the Talmud, is the Talmud itself. I don't remember. But the answer is like this, that really when Hashem said that we're going to leave with great riches, that's referring to the splitting of the Red Sea. Because what happens is that Paro encourages all the Egyptians to go chase after the Jews. And the Jews are not that, and the Egyptians are not interested. They've just suffered 10 plagues. They've had the firstborn die in every single family. They're like, you know what? We suffered enough already, Paro. Just let the Jews go. But Paro became stubborn again. He doesn't want to let the Jews go. So he opens up his treasure house and he says, anyone that's willing to go, can just go take treasure. So everyone took treasure, they put it in their pockets, and then they started chasing after the Jews when they drowned in the Red Sea. So then Hashem had after they drowned, so Hashem had the Yamsuf actually go and spit up the Egyptians. And the Egyptians were there, and the Jews went into their pockets and they took out all of the treasure. And in fact, that treasure was much, much more than they ended up taking out of time. So they became filthy rich from everything that they took at the Red Sea. And in fact, there was more to take. The Torah tells us that Moshe had to force the people to travel. They didn't want to travel, but Moshe Rabbeinu said to them, okay, guys, we have to go. And I'm not sure why it was time to go already, but they had enough, and that's it. We have to go. Moshe Rabbeinu forced them all to go. So therefore, according to this, it's true that, of course, Hashem was going to keep his word. But Hashem really had in mind the Red Sea. The Red Sea takes place on the 7th day after we left Mitzrayim. But Avram is not going to want to wait. Avram is going to want to say right away, Hashem said, let him take already some riches now. That way Avram won't come and he won't complain to me. That way Avram won't come and he won't complain to me. And that way, and that they will be happy. But of course, Hashem is going to keep his word by the fact that on the 7th day, we're going to get all the riches. Now, a few more points, and that is that in the very beginning of the paragraph, it says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu chishev es haketz lasos, which means that Hashem calculated the end. Now, what does that mean, he calculated the end? So, literally, it means that he figured out the end, and he figured out that it was time for us, to go. But there's a famous idea that Kates, the end, is Gematria 190, which means that we were only in Egypt for 210 years. Hashem promised we're going to be in Egypt for 400 years. So that means that we left 190 years early. So Hashem calculated Kates being Gematria 190, means Hashem calculated the 190, and he somehow figured out, right, whether it was at the night counts or it's at the quality counts, but he somehow figured out to view it as if we were in Egypt for the full 400. He calculated that 190 as if it was there. Now, the last point which needs to be discussed is, why was it? What is this covenant here? Why was it that Hashem wanted Avram to become a slave, or Avram's descendants to become slaves? Like Hashem says to them, you're going to become terrible slaves. Don't worry, you're going to become rich. Hashem can't figure out another way to give us riches. Why did he want us to become slaves? So they give different explanations, but they all seem to focus around the point that this somehow was in our best interest. This was somehow good for us. Whether it taught us what it means to be downtrodden, or it made us more humble, which was a very important, a necessary character trait in order for us to be able to go and receive the Torah. And if we didn't have that, then we wouldn't have been able to receive the Torah. Somehow there was something in us which needed to get, like, if you will, beaten out of us. And therefore, we needed this experience in Egypt. And therefore, that's why Hashem told Avram that we're going to have this suffering in Egypt. There are different explanations that say that Avram himself did something wrong, and the fact that we went down to Egypt was a punishment. But it seems overall the general consensus is that this was somehow in our best interest. And that's why Hashem did this to us, because it's something which was good for us. Yes, Simma?
You say that it says that it spit out the Egyptians and they had all the gold and silver and jewelry in their pocket, and there was so much, and that's how they got most of their riches, and there was even extras. But wouldn't it all fall out in the sea, and while they're running and jumping, if their pockets are so bulging full, how would it all still be in their pockets?
Why didn't all the diamonds fall out in the sea? I don't know. I guess not. They had a good zipper. All right, zippers weren't invented yet. I don't know. It's a good question. It could be that it wasn't only in their pockets. It could be that just the jewelry was spit out. All the gems were spit out. Now, one last point. I heard this a few years ago. I was surprised that I never thought about it before. I mentioned last night, and I mentioned tonight, that the Jews were on this 49th level of Tumah, all the way down there on the bottom. And if Hashem had not saved us, so then we would have descended even further. Now, exactly how it worked, like how often did we go down a level? I don't know. That it doesn't say anywhere. But what's fascinating is that means that exactly on the 15th of Nisan, in the morning or afternoon, whatever time it was that Hashem took us out of the Exodus, the leaving of Egypt started at night, but it didn't really start at night. Paro came and he freed us at night, but then we didn't actually leave Egypt until the next day. So if Hashem says we have to go now, and if we don't go now, then we're going to blow it, and I'm never going to be able to take you up because you're going to descend so far down. Now, what's interesting or surprising is that they've just witnessed now 10 plagues. They've witnessed 10 plagues. They saw and the point of the plagues is to create each one of the plagues is there to create it's not just to punish the Mitzrayim. Hashem just wanted to punish the Mitzrayim so he could punish them, and that's it. It's not to punish the Mitzrayim as much as it is to teach them, and probably more importantly, us, a lesson in how Hashem runs the world, and that Hashem is in control of the animals. Hashem is in control of the water. Hashem is in control of the heavens. Each one of these, each plague proves a different aspect that Hashem is in control of. So maybe you're willing to admit that Hashem is in control of the water, but you're not willing to admit that Hashem is in control of the animals. Okay, fine, he's in control of down here, but maybe he's not in control of the skies. Nope, even hail, even darkness, even Hashem is the boss of everything. That was the lesson of all of these plagues. So everyone that's watching this should be getting that lesson. So if that's true, so then why are they going down a level? Why are they going down a level? They should be done. They shouldn't be going down levels anymore. They should be they should be working their way up now. They should be recognizing that Hashem is in control of the world. And if that's the case, so why should it be that they're very, very on the very bottom if Hashem doesn't come right now? They should be working their way up the more they recognize it. So it's a very strong question. It's a very strong question. So the person who told it to me, I think what he was suggesting was like this, that when it comes to miracles, so a miracle will only affect you if you do something about it. If you take whatever it is that you're seeing and you take active measures, to show how I want this to change me, then it will change you. But if not, a person could have a miracle. And then they could be the same person that they were. They just witnessed this unbelievable miracle. It's unbelievable. It should totally change them. So the answer is, yeah, it was cool. But that's it. Like nothing Nothing more than that. If we do something, if we take an action, then that miracle could be a very big catalyst. It could be a stimulus for us to go and change. But if not, so it's just a miracle that we saw, and that's it. Nothing more than that. It was cool. So if the Jews are sitting there and they're witnessing the miracles, and they're like, "Wow, Hashem is powerful," but they're not sitting there and they're not what's the right word? They're not bringing it into their insides. They're not thinking about it, and they're not digesting it, and they're not realizing that Hashem is in control of the world. Then that's it. They're going to stay on the same low level. They're going to stay on the same low level that they were. There's a story that there was a rabbi, Rabbi Levenstein. He was a mashgiach of the Panovich Yeshiva in the 50s, 60s. So he was in a taxi once, and the taxi driver said to him, I have a best friend from the army that's religious. So he said, really? That's very nice. So he said, yeah, I'll tell you the story. After we finished our service in the army, so we went on a backpacking trip, and we were in Africa, and we were there for a few days, and one day we wake up to blood-curdling screams, and we see that my friend has a boa constrictor wrapped around his neck, and it's starting to tighten and tighten, and we all come running, and we're trying to pull it off, but it's so strong that we can't pull it off. We try to hit it with rocks or whatever, and there's nothing we could do. So it's getting tighter and tighter, and he's literally about to die right there in front of our eyes. So someone calls out to him and says, "Nunu lefachot tagid shma." At the very least, you're about to die. Say shma. So he says, "Okay, I guess." So he screams out shma. He screams out shma, and as he says shma Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the snake releases itself and he slithers away. So this guy, to his credit, he's just seen an open miracle, and he says, okay, life cannot go on, and he takes the next flight back to Israel, and he enrolls in a yeshiva, and today he's sitting and learning, and he's a religious man. So he took the miracle and he used it to push him. So Rev Levenstein looks at the taxi driver and says, "You witnessed this?" And he says, "Yeah, I saw the whole thing." He says, "So how come he became religious and you didn't become religious?" So he says, "The snake was around his neck. It wasn't around my neck. What does it have to do with me?" Now, even the guy that was around his neck, if he didn't do something about it, nothing would have changed him. And perhaps if he would have said, "You know what, I'm enjoying the trip. I'm going to go check out yeshiva as soon as we finish our vacation," he also maybe never would have changed. Sometimes you got to seize the moment when it comes. And to his credit, he did, and he realized, if I don't go now, I may blow it. So he went, and he said, "I'm going right now," and he did it. So the Jews, they're sitting there, and they're witnessing everything that's going on. But perhaps it didn't affect them. My father has a whole piece explaining everything that goes on with the dreidel. But one of the things that he mentions is that the custom is that when you play dreidel, that when it lands on nun, so you get nothing. So when it lands on nun, you get nothing. So why nothing? So nun on the dreidel represents nace. So he says a miracle is great, but inherently it's nothing. It's only if you choose to do something about it. If you choose greatness, so then you get the whole pot. But if you just the miracle itself isn't anything. You have to go and you have to take action. You have to do something. So perhaps that explains why the Jews are sitting there. They see the 10 plagues. They see one of the greatest proofs in the history of the world that Hashem is in control. But nevertheless, they don't sit there. They don't think about it. They don't really think twice about it. And therefore, they continue in their ways. And you finally come to the end, and they're still sinking lower and lower every single day. Because if you don't actively try to do something to change, then that's it. You're just going to sink lower and lower, and you're not going to change. You have to actively say, okay, fine. So I've seen this. Now, what am I going to do to bring change into my life? And if you're not going to do that, then it's not going to bring any change into your life. Okay, thank you for listening. Do you have any questions? Okay, thank you so much. Maybe I'll see you tomorrow night. I hope so, 7 o'clock. Have a good night.